Welcome to the fourth of 5 mini lectures on William Shakespeare's tragedy, Macbeth. In this mini lecture, we're going to work through the 3 scenes of Act 4, working first through a new set of prophecies that Macbeth gets from the 3 witches, and as part of that, also taking a look at some of the historical significance of the play and how it connects to the context, the historical context in which Shakespeare was writing. We're also going to take a closer look at Macduff's character. So in the second scene, we're going to see what happens to his family when he goes to England. And in the third scene, we're going to see him in England trying to convince Malcolm to return back to Scotland and fight for the throne. Remember, Malcolm is Duncan's son and certainly has a claim to the throne that Macbeth now sits upon. All right, Act 4, Scene 1. Is a wonderful scene, and in many ways, some of our ideas about what Macbeth should be comes from this scene. Now, with that said, there's a lot of room for creativity in Act 4, especially in Scene 1, as we continue with what are the 3 witches going to look like on stage? What are we going to do with them? So lots of fun there. Now the scene opens and they are circling a cauldron and they're preparing a magic spell. And this magic spell is pretty dark. Let's listen to the ingredients that they put in their cauldron. This is Act 4, Scene 1, line 4, right near the beginning. They're dancing around the cauldron. Round about the cauldron go, in the poisoned entrails throw. Your entrails are your guts, right? Your intestines. And so they've got some poisoned entrails that they're throwing in. Toad that under cold stone, days and nights has 31, sweltered venom sleeping got. So they've got a toad that's been dead for 31 days and nights. They're throwing that in, so it's not a pretty gross thing to think about. Boil thou first in the charmed pot. So they dance around. They've got this toad in their pot. He's the first ingredient. And then they have the very famous line. You've heard this line before. It's in Harry Potter. It's in a bunch of different, there's a lot of cultural references. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Now the second witch has her part. She's going to throw in some more ingredients. Fillet of a fenny snake, so a piece of the side of a snake, in the cauldron boil and bake. Eye of newt and toe of frog, wool of bat and tongue of dog. They've got a dog's tongue. They throw that in. Adder's fork. That's a snake's tongue. An adder is a snake, and they've cut out its forked tongue. So they've got all these tongues. And blindworm's sting, lizard's leg, and owlet's wing. That's kind of sad. An owlet's a baby owl. They've got a wing from a baby owl. They've gotten for a charm of powerful trouble, like a hell broth boil and bubble. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Now the third witch has some of the most interesting ingredients. They sort of turn your stomach just a little as you read through these. So the first one's not too bad. Scale of dragon, tooth of wolf, witch's mummy, maw and gulf, of the raven salt sea shark, root of hemlock digged in the dark. So we have a hemlock tree just outside of the building here. So they've dug up a root from a hemlock. It's a kind of a pine tree, a fir tree. They've dug that root up in the dark. They throw that in. Not too bad yet, but now here's where it gets really bad. Liver of a blaspheming Jew. So they've got a guy's liver. Gall of goat and slips of ewe slivered in the moon's eclipse. A nose of Turk and Tartar's lips. So they've got another guy's nose, another one's lips. And then here's the one that usually, if there's a rhythm to this, it's coming to the climax here. Finger of a birth-strangled babe, ditch delivered by a drab. So they have a little baby's finger that was born in a ditch to a harlot. Didn't make it, and they've got its finger, and they throw the baby's finger in. Make the gruel thick and slab. And there too a tiger's chaudron for the ingredients of our cauldron. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Then the second witch ends the spell, ends the mixture that they're making. Cool it with a baboon's blood. So she pours in some baboon's blood. Then the charm is firm and good. They've got this spell already, And then all of a sudden, Macbeth approaches. He's looking for them. He wants to hear more about what they have to say about his own future. And it's fun here, too. They've got this great line 44 and 45. The second witch says, "By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes." So in Shakespeare's time, people were very superstitious. And there was a common belief that if you felt a pricking feeling in your thumb, then there was a demon or a devil or something evil nearby. So if you ever have that pricking feeling in the tips of your fingers, in the tips of your thumbs, that's a warning sign if you're particularly superstitious. Or I don't think people believe this anymore, but in Shakespeare's time, it was a common superstition. And all of a sudden, it's the witch who feels it. So go back, all these things that they've just put into their cauldron, and they're the ones calling Macbeth evil. How on earth did they get all that stuff? So to have the witch, this second witch, one of the witches calling Macbeth wicked, getting a pricking in her thumbs. Anyway, that's just a great moment. So Macbeth comes and he wants to know, he's concerned about this prophecy. He's especially concerned about this idea that Banquo's issue will be king. Remember, he's had Banquo murdered. Banquo's ghost came and visited him in the last act at the banquet scene. But Fleance escaped. His son escaped, and he is very, very concerned about what that means for his reign as king, for his future. So he comes to them and he says, I need more information. Now, instead of making prophecies themselves, they're going to call for 3 apparitions from this cauldron. So again, this is a fun scene to do on stage. You've got to make decisions about what these 3 apparitions look like. Some of them we get some implied stage direction to help, especially the third one. But even with that third one, you have a lot of choices as director what you're going to do with it. So here's the first apparition. This is line 71. This apparition rises up out of the boiling pot. Now, remember, maybe it's not even a cauldron. Maybe it's something else that you do with this. First apparition, line 71, says, "Macbeth, Macbeth, Macbeth. Beware, Macduff. Beware the Thane of Fife. Dismiss me. Enough." So the first prophecy is, watch out for Macduff. And Macbeth says, yeah, I was worried about that too. And he tries to ask that first apparition for some more information, but the witches say, no, don't call him back. You can't do that. What he said is enough. That's all you get. But there's a second apparition who does indeed have more to say. This is line 79. The second apparition says, "Be bloody, bold, and resolute. Laugh to scorn the power of man, for none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. Don't worry about anything. Nothing can, no man who's born of a woman can possibly hurt you." And Macbeth is like, hey, that's pretty good news. If no man who's born of a woman can hurt me, I should be fine. He says, then live, Macduff. What need I fear of thee? But then he goes on and says, well, I'm going to be double sure, just in case. But yet I'll make assurance double sure, and take a bond of fate. Thou shalt not live, that I may tell pale-hearted fear it lies, and sleep in spite of thunder. So I'm going to take care of Macduff anyway. But, hey, it's kind of nice to know that no man of woman born can harm me. Third, and this one we get a little bit of stage direction. Macbeth, as he sees the third apparition come up, says, what is this that rises like the issue of a king and wears upon his baby brow the round and top of sovereignty? So it's a baby brow, so it's a baby, this last one, or at least it's an apparition in the form of a baby, and it's wearing a golden crown, a king's crown on its head. So we have some stage direction for what this looks like, and most productions are going to stay relatively true to this, although not always. It just depends. There's certainly room for creativity of what that crown looks like, what a baby is. Sometimes it can be hard to pull this one off. I've seen it done with like a baby doll, for example, and it gets a laugh in a moment it shouldn't. So this is it's a tough one, and you have to be creative. You have to time it just right. It's definitely a challenge for actors and directors to get this right if they're going to follow strictly to that stage direction. But most do anyway. The third apparition, this is line 90, gives the third and last of the prophecies. Be lion-mettled proud, and take no care who chafes, who frets, or where conspirers are. Macbeth shall never vanquished be, until great Birnam Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come against him. So Birnam Wood is the forest that surrounds Dunsinane Castle, until that forest itself pulls itself up out of the ground, pulls its roots up and marches against you. You have nothing to worry about. That sounds good to Macbeth. He says, that will never be. Who can impress the forest? Bid the tree unfix his earthbound root. What army, what general can make a tree pull its roots out of the ground and march against me? That can never be. So he's feeling pretty good at this point. But that one question he's had from the beginning still weighs on him. What about Banquo's issue? What about Banquo's children? What about Fleance? And he says, line 100, yet my heart throbs to know one thing. Tell me if your art can tell so much. Shall Banquo's issue ever reign in this kingdom? And the apparitions are gone, but the witches are still there, and they don't want to tell him this information. Seek to know no more. But he says, you will tell me. He says, line 104, I will be satisfied. Deny me this, and an eternal curse fall on you. Let me know. So they do, and they say, show his eyes and grieve. This is line 110. Show his eyes and grieve his heart. Come like shadows, so depart. So they call forth a vision that Macbeth is to watch. And it's going to be the vision of 8 kings walking in front of him. And all of these 8 kings look an awful lot like Banquo. And the last one's going to have a mirror in his hand that he holds up. And so you can see 8 more kings. So it looks like this endless line of kings in this mirror that are going to come. And this is going to wreck Macbeth's heart. So here, line 112, he sees the first king. Thou art too like the spirit of Banquo. Down! Thy crown does sear mine eyeballs, and thy hair. Thou other gold-bound brow is like the first. So he sees a second one. And it looks just like the first one. A third is like the former. Filthy hags, why do you show me this? A fourth? Start eyes. What, will the line stretch out to the crack of doom? Crack of doom, the end of time? Will this go on forever? Another yet? A seventh? So we've got this line of king ghosts sort of marching toward him, and he sees the future. I'll see no more. And yet the 8th appears, who bears a glass which shows me many more. And some I see that twofold balls and treble scepters carry. Horrible sight! Now I see 'tis true, for the blood-boltered Banquo smiles upon me, and points at them for his. So Banquo's ghost gets another brief moment here where we see it. It's worth noting, too, one line in there, this idea of twofold balls and treble scepters carry. So they carry a scepter, and some of them have 2 little balls at the top, and some have 3. And that seems an interesting reference. So I want to explain that. Normally in the mini lectures, I don't go too far into the historical context of the plays, but that is a fascinating topic to get into, especially with Macbeth. So I'm going to take a detour for just a moment to go into that. Shakespeare wrote this play in 1606. King James had just taken the throne in 1603, about 3 years earlier. And a lot of scholars write about and talk about how this play was written in honor of King James. Now, James had been king of Scotland previously for a long time, so it makes sense to write a play about Scottish history in his honor. And he had been king of Scotland for a long time before he also became king of England. And according to legend, according to myth, he could trace his lineage all the way back to Banquo. So this play, in many ways, is meant to honor that lineage. Shakespeare wrote it so that he could honor the current king, King James, and honor that long, long lineage that goes all the way back in time to Macbeth. Now, Macbeth was a real king. He reigned in Scotland in the 11th century, some 500 years before Shakespeare wrote the play. So he had this sort of historical, legendary significance. He reigned for 17 years. It wasn't as quick a reign as Shakespeare's play suggests, and I highly doubt Macbeth was quite as evil as he is in the play, or quite the tyrant. Like anything political, it depends on your perspective. Duncan was king before him. Now, whether or not Macbeth actually killed Duncan is a question for historians to answer with a little more detail than I will here. This idea that Banquo's issue came after Macbeth is also part of the legend. So in writing this play, even though he takes liberty to make the characters his own, to shift things around, to tighten the history, make it much more compact, to feel like it happened much more quickly than the 17 years that the real Macbeth reigned, he's doing it all the same to honor King James, and the new King of England. So this idea of having two balls at the top of your scepter refers to the fact that King James, who had been King of Scotland a long time in 1603, also became King of England and united the two countries. 1603 is sort of when Great Britain starts, this idea of a united kingdom, and England and Scotland combine into the same country under James. Now, this idea of a third ball is also interesting, and it could have some different references. Could refer to Ireland. It also could refer to the idea that the King of England is the King of France. And for a long time, and I won't get into the history there, but for a long time, the King of England, from well before James all the way back to Henry V, back to Edward III, almost back to Macbeth's time even, the King of England claimed control of France as well, that he had a legal right to also be the King of France. Now, militarily, there were a lot of wars between France and England. I won't go into that, but there's this idea. So that's the 2 and 3 scepters there. All right, let's jump back to the play and jump right into Act 4, Scene 2. Act 4, Scene 2 is, in some ways, the murderer is going to be back, the first and second murderer, or just the first murderer gets lines, but you could have both of them there. They're going to come back, and this scene in many ways feels like the scene in which Banquo is murdered. Macbeth is not, like he said earlier in the previous scene, he's not going to let Macduff live, so he sends these murderers to Macduff's castle. Macduff is the Thane of Fife. And he's going to have Macduff murdered, but Macduff isn't there. So instead what happens is his entire family in Act 4, Scene 2 falls to these murderers. Let's take a look at how Shakespeare builds this scene. Act 4, Scene 2, line 7, we see Lady Macduff. Ross is there. Remember, Ross is that minor character who keeps coming up. He delivers a lot of messages. He's here trying to convince Lady Macduff to get out of there. Someone bad's coming. He knows that. And she won't leave. Line 7, she says to leave his wife, and she's very upset at Macduff for having left her alone here. To leave his wife, to leave his babes, his mansions, and his titles in a place from whence himself does fly? He loves us not. He wants the natural touch. For the poor wren, the most diminutive of birds, so there's a lot of bird imagery in the play, there's a lot of bird imagery in this scene in particular. The poor wren, the most diminutive, the smallest of birds, will fight her young ones in the nest against the owl. So the smallest, the tiniest of bird, the wren, would fight if he had to, against an owl even, which is one of the biggest birds of prey, would fight against the owl. All is the fear and nothing is the love, as little is the wisdom where the flight so runs against all reason. So Ross is trying to convince her to leave. She won't leave, and in fact she's very upset with Macduff for what he's done, for having left her alone in this castle. And Ross, and it leaves Lady Macduff with this very tender scene with her son. And in this way, it does feel a lot like the Banquo scene too, because we've got another young boy on stage. A lot of times, the most effective way to play this is to have a child play it, I think it should be a young son, should not be an adult son at all. It wouldn't work as well. Line 31, Lady Macduff says to the child, "Sirrah, your father's dead, and what will you do now? How will you live?" He's not literally dead, but he's gone. And the son says, "As birds do, mother." What, with worms and flies? With what I get, I mean, and so do they. So he's like, I'll survive. I'll figure out a way to survive. Line 45, the little boy says to his mother, "Was my father a traitor, mother?" "Aye, that he was." "What is a traitor?" "Why, one that swears and lies." "And be all traitors that do so?" "Every one that does so is a traitor and must be hanged." "And must they all be hanged that swear and lie?" "Every one." "Who must hang them?" "Why, the honest men." And then there's this little witty repartee that the son has. "Then the liars and swearers are fools, for there are liars and swearers enough to beat the honest men and hang them up. There's more liars and more dishonest men than there are honest ones, so there's no way the honest men could hang all the liars." Lady Macduff laughs at his joke here. "God help thee, poor monkey. But how wilt thou do for father?" And here goes back to that last line. He knows his father's not really dead. He says, "If he were dead, you'd weep for him. If you would not, it were a good sign that I should quickly have a new father." So he's making this joke. And if it's done right, it should not only get the audience to laugh at his joke, but it should also endear us to him. He's this charming, cute little guy, and he's making jokes with his mother in this moment. One of the things Shakespeare knows and does beautifully, he's an expert at human psychology, and he knows that if he can make us as an audience laugh in one moment, then he can make us cry in the next. And he does this at multiple points in his playwriting, and this is one of them. So the audience kind of chuckles at this cute little guy, charming little guy making this joke. Even Lady Macduff chuckles. She says, "Poor prattler, how thou talkst." And then about a moment later, the murderers in they come, and he's killed, and the little boy is killed. The mother's killed, and even though he only gets this one scene, Shakespeare's written in a way that's endeared us to him almost instantly, and hopefully the casting director has cast a little guy that can pull this part off too to endear us to him. In the last lines of the scene, the first murderer says, "What, you egg," a little more bird imagery, "young fry of treachery," and he stabs this little boy. And the line isn't particularly great, but the moment, because Shakespeare set it up so nicely, should drive us to really feel some empathy, some sadness here. "He's killed me, mother. Run away, I pray you." So not exactly the most poetic of Shakespeare's lines, but I think he set it up in a way so that he's really left it to the actors to find the right way to do that. But this scene, if it's done well on stage, should feel, even though it's a short scene, just have sort of an emotional roller coaster feel to it. You start off knowing what's about to happen. You see this mother and son alone, and you sort of feel, oh, what a nice family. And then it's destroyed almost instantly after that. And that's what Shakespeare does well in terms of understanding human psychology, human emotions. Act 4, Scene 3, we see Macduff again. And Macduff is now in England. Remember, Lady Macduff complained that he had left. He's left, he's in England, and he's there to convince Malcolm to return back to Scotland and reclaim the throne. He should have been the rightful heir. He should be the King of Scotland, not Macbeth. And he's trying to make this case, but Malcolm is suspicious. Malcolm has had others come from Scotland, sent from Macbeth, who have tempted him to come back, but only tempting him into a trap. So he doesn't know with certainty whether or not he can actually trust Macduff. Line 13, right in the middle of the line. If you're not following along with me, follow along. Act 4, Scene 3, line 13. Malcolm says to Macduff, "You have loved him well. He has not touched you yet." Now, they don't know that Macbeth indeed has touched him. He indeed has raided his castle, killed his family. Macduff's going to find that out a little later, but at this point in the scene, he doesn't know that yet. Malcolm says, "I'm young. I'm naive. I don't know everything about the world, but something you may deserve of him through me, and wisdom to offer a weak, poor, innocent lamb to appease an angry God. You might just be trying to tempt me." Macduff declines. He says, "No, I am not treacherous." But Macbeth is. "A good and virtuous nature may recoil in an imperial charge." So an imperial is a kingly charge, a kingly order. Even the best of us will cower if a king tells us what to do. We'll do it. Even if you are virtuous and good, that will recoil, that will pull back if you're told to do so by a king, won't it? They continue to talk. Malcolm is uncertain. Line 38, he says to Macduff, "Be not offended. I speak not as an absolute fear of you. I think our country," referring back to Scotland, "sinks beneath the yoke. It weeps, it bleeds, and each new day a gash is added to her wounds. I think withal there would be hands uplifted in my right, and here from gracious England I have offer of goodly thousands." So the English king, the English people have offered thousands of soldiers to help Malcolm if he does decide to go back to Scotland and fight. "But for all this, when I shall tread upon the tyrant's head, or wear it on my sword, yet my poor country shall have more vices than it had before." That should take you back a moment. Wait, what did Malcolm just say? When you hear that, if it sounds a little confusing, wait, I thought Malcolm was the good guy, right? Why is he saying my poor country shall have more vices on it than it had before? He's testing Macduff in this line. He's testing to see if he said he was suspicious earlier, and here he's testing him, and he's saying, I'd actually be a worse king than Macbeth, and let me tell you why. And he goes on to list it. Macduff says, "What should he be? And he says in line, Malcolm answers line 52, just down the page. It is myself, I mean, in whom I know all the particulars of vice so grafted, that when they shall be opened, black Macbeth will seem as pure as snow, and the poor state esteem him as a lamb, being compared with my confineless harms. Macduff says, no, there's no way that you could be worse a king than Macbeth. He says, not in the legions of horrid hell can come a devil more damned in evils to top Macbeth. The deepest demon in hell isn't as bad as Macbeth. Malcolm goes on, he says, well, but I am. I'm worse than him. And he goes on. He says, I grant him bloody. Yeah, Macbeth's bloody. Sure, he kills people. He's luxurious, avaricious. Avarice is like bottomless selfishness. Like you want everything and it's like the word selfish, but times 10. Avaricious, false, deceitful, sudden, malicious, smacking of every sin that has a name. Sure, Macbeth, he's committed every single sin you can imagine. Yeah, he's pretty bad. But there's no bottom, none, in my voluptuousness. Your wives, your daughters, your matrons, and your maids could not fill up the cistern of my lust. I'm a womanizer. I would have every single woman in the kingdom be my concubine. I'm terrible. You wouldn't want me. He says, could not fill up the cistern of my lust, and my desire all continent impediments would o'erbear that did oppose my will. Anyone tried to stop me from getting every single woman I wanted? It's better Macbeth than such a one to reign. It's better Macbeth rule than a man like me who is after every single woman that would violate women that way. Macduff doesn't quite know what to say here, but he really wants Malcolm to come back and fight. He really hates Macbeth. Line 74, he finally says, I guess that's not a big deal. He says, we have willing dames enough. There's enough women in Scotland who would be more than happy to fulfill your lust. They'd be happy to do so because you'd be a king. You'd be powerful. You'd have more will. You wouldn't need to take any women away. There'd be lots of beautiful women for you. We have willing dames enough. There cannot be that vulture in you to devour so many as will to greatness dedicate themselves, finding it so inclined. You'll have more women than you could ever want once you're king. It'll be just fine. Macduff goes on. Malcolm goes on and he says, well, there's more. Line 79, he says, I have a staunchless avarice. So my avarice, remember that's that bottomless selfishness, my intense selfishness. That were I king, I should cut off the nobles for their lands. I would steal their properties, their lands. Desire his jewels and this other's house, and more having would be as a sauce to make me hunger more. And the more I got, the more I'd want. That I should forge quarrels unjust against the good and loyal, destroying them for wealth. I'd get into petty fights with the other thanes just so I could steal their lands and take them from them. I would want everything. I wouldn't share at all. Macduff's still concerned, but he's going to get over it. Line 85, this avarice sticks even deeper, he says. And line 89, though, he's like, okay, I'm okay with it, though. Yet do not fear, Scotland hath foisons to fill up your will of your mere own. All these are portable, with other graces weighed. So it's like, okay, so you are a womanizer, and you are very, very selfish in terms of wanting land and wealth. It's like, against everything else, we can take that. We'll accept that. And keep in mind, Malcolm here he's testing Macduff. He's not really describing himself. He's describing himself in this way to test Macduff. And so far, Macduff sounds like all the others who've came. They're just simply trying to trick Malcolm into coming. And then this idea of him having other graces, Malcolm answers, but I have none. The king becoming graces such as justice, verity, temperance, stableness, bounty, perseverance, mercy, lowliness, devotion, patience, courage, fortitude, I have no relish of them, but abound in the division of each several crime, acting it many ways. Nay, had I power, I should pour the sweet milk of concord into hell, uproar the universal peace, confound all unity in earth. I don't have any of those things that a king should have. You don't understand just what I would be like if I were king. And finally, Macduff relents. He says, oh, Scotland. Malcolm says, if such a one be fit to govern, speak. I am as I have spoken. This is what I'm like. Macduff says, fit to govern? No, not to live. Line 110, he says of Malcolm, "Thy royal father was a most sainted king. The queen that bore thee," referring back to Duncan, right? He was a most sainted, he was a saint. "The queen that bore thee oftener upon her knees than on her feet," because she was always praying. She was always on her knees praying. "Died every day she lived. Fare thee well. These evils thou reapest upon thyself have banished me from Scotland. O my breast, thy hope ends here." Scotland's ruined. We have no hope now because you're gone. And finally, at this point, Malcolm realizes, okay, he loves Scotland. He's going to leave. He's not just here to trick me into going back to Macbeth. Macduff now has earned Malcolm's trust. And he comes back and he says, actually all that stuff I said. And it can be humorous depending on how you do it. He comes back and says, actually I'm not like that. He says, in fact, I've never even been with a woman. I'm a virgin myself. I have no such ideas of lust. I'm not selfish. He said, in fact, and as far as being honest and true, I love honesty as much as life itself. So he pulls it all back. He wins Macduff, and now that he's tested him, now they can be friends. Now they can figure out how they're going to throw Macbeth off the throne. One more part to scene 3 we need to go over. Ross shows up. And remember, Ross was there in the last scene. He keeps showing up, this minor character, this messenger. Gets lots of lines, actually. He shows up over and over again, even though he's probably easily forgettable. Macduff sees Ross. He says, "How does my wife?" This is Act 4, Scene 3, line 177. Make sure you're opened up and following along. "Why, well. And my children? Well, too. The tyrant has not battered at their peace? No, they were well at peace when I did leave them." Ross knows. He knows that Macduff's family has been killed, and he can't quite bear it to tell him just yet. Like they continue this conversation, but he can't tell Macduff right away because it's emotional. Ross says, finally he tells him. He says, line 205, "Your castle is surprised, your wife and babes savagely slaughtered." And this is hard. This is a powerful emotional scene, and we have to see Macduff go from this. He's been tested now by Malcolm to see if he's true, and now he's being tested again. But this one time's for real. This information isn't made up. He says in line 212, "My children too, wife, children, servants, all. That is all that could be found. And I must be from thence. My wife killed too." Ross doesn't want to continue. "I have said." Malcolm tries to comfort him. He says, let's make medicines of our great revenge. Macduff then says, "We can't make revenge." He's got this beautiful line. "He has no children. There's no way he can get revenge on Macbeth for what he's done. Macbeth doesn't have children. He can't make him feel the pain that Macduff is feeling right now. All my pretty ones? Did you say all? Oh, hell kite, all? What, all my pretty chickens and their dam at one fell swoop?" And Malcolm has an interesting line here. He says, "Dispute it like a man." That should sound a lot like the way Lady Macbeth talked to Macbeth earlier in the play. Question his manhood, and that will drive him to sort of this anger, this rage, to revenge. It works with Macbeth. That line doesn't work with Macduff. Malcolm says, "Dispute it like a man." Macduff says, "I shall do so, but I must also feel it as a man." And he goes on, and he line 224, he goes on, and he says, to be a man, you have to feel emotion. You have to feel pain, too. When you lose something, it's not so simple as just be a man about it. All right, we will wrap up with Act 5, Scene 1 in the next mini lecture.